As time goes on, things change and advance. In the field of medicine, vaccines and diseases, as well as people, have changed. In America, many physicians, nurses, and scientists have made contributions to the progress in medicine. Starting from the beginning of America to today, we have made huge progress in medical advancements. Beginning in 1796, Edward Jenner developed the process of vaccination for smallpox, the first vaccine for any disease. Jenner developed the process of immunization by injecting patients with different types of viruses and seeing which they were immune to. This saved an enormous amount of lives in this age. In 1842, Crawford W. Long used ether as an anesthetic for the first time. As part of his medical practice, he began to experiment with sulfuric ether. He performed his first surgical procedure by using anesthetic gas on March 30th, when he removed a tumor from the neck of a young man. He continued to use anesthesia over the years as part of his obstetrical practice, but he did not publish his research. In that time, many doctors were skeptical about gases or other chemicals being used as an anesthesia, so Dr. Long wanted to be very sure that this type of anesthesia worked.
In 1849, Elizabeth Blackwell was the first woman to get a medical degree. She went to the school at Geneva Medical College in New York. She was born in Britain, but she mostly lived her life in America. She was a pioneer and promoted the education of women. As we go through time, we can see that many of the breakthroughs that appeared long ago are still used today. In 1881, the first Red Cross was founded by Clara Barton and a circle of her acquaintances. Even now, we use the helpful people and tools of the Red Cross today. In 1885, the first successful appendectomy was performed in Iowa. Usually, in that time, doctors would let diseased people die instead of spending the time to cure them. After performing an untested surgery, Dr. William Grant saved a young woman who fully recovered from the surgery he performed. In 1893, Chicago surgeon Daniel Hell Williams performed the first successful open-heart surgery. It became both a significant medical advancement and a huge step in the fight for equality. Williams was one of the nation's few black cardiologists at the time. In 1901, shortly after radiation began to be used for diagnosis and therapy, it was discovered that radiation would cause cancer as well as cure it. Many early radiologists used the skin of their arms to test the strength of radiation from their radiotherapy machines, looking for a dose that would produce a pink reaction or erythema, which looked like a sunburn. They called this the erythema dose, and it was considered an estimate of the proper regular dose of radiation. It was no surprise that many of them developed leukemia from regularly exposing themselves to radiation.
In 1904, the National Tuberculosis Association, now called the American Lung Association, was founded to encourage the prevention and cure of tuberculosis. It was founded by Henry Martin Hall, Edward Livingston Turdeau, Robert Hall Babcock, and Lawrence Flick. The association is still running today to prevent tuberculosis and other diseases of the lung. In 1907, the first successful human blood transfusion occurred using Karl Landsteiner's ABO blood typing technique. Landsteiner suggested his findings might be applicable to blood transfusion practices. It is now astonishing that this idea was not adopted until more than a decade later. During this period, other blood type designations were described in the United States by Moss in 1910. In 1913, Dr. Paul Dudley White was one of the first pioneers to use the electrocardiograph, or EKG. Dr. White was a specialist on the diseases of the heart and circulatory system. He was a founding member of the American Heart Association and the International Society of Cardiology. The famous Band-Aid was invented by a man named Earl Dixon in 1921. His inspiration was helping his wife, who was always accidentally cutting herself in the kitchen while preparing food. Dixon was employed as a cotton buyer for the Johnson & Johnson Company, which gave him access to the materials he needed for his now very famous and useful invention. In 1922, insulin was first used to treat diabetes. Frederick Banting and Charles Best tested the use of insulin on dogs and were able to stretch out their lifespan by adding about 70 days at a time to each trial, leading to the treatment and understanding of insulin today.
In 1945, The first vaccine for influenza was developed. Thomas Francis, the Director of Commission on Influenza, United States Army Epidemiological Board, was the first American to isolate the human influenza virus. He and Jonas Salk researched a vaccine for influenza at the University of Michigan, and over the years, it was perfected and sent out to save thousands of lives. Later on, in 1950, John Hobbs, an American electrical engineer, invented the first cardiac pacemaker device. Hobbs found that if the heart stopped beating when temperature dropped, that it could be restarted artificially. This research allowed the development of the first cardiac defibrillation machine. Today, this instrument has been largely improved and used in many emergencies. Moving on, in 1954, Gertrude Elion patented a leukemia-fighting drug. She worked on chemotherapy and created substances to destroy cancer cells, but not harm the healthy ones. Her work helped change lives of people all over the country and even the world. The first successful kidney transplant was performed in 1959. The identical Hedrick twins were the first patients in a successful kidney transplant. During the middle of the 20th century, organ transplants remained largely impossible. Skin and eyes were among the first successful transplants, but larger, more complex, and embedded organs posed countless of problems. The kidney was the first such organ to be successfully implanted. In 1964, the first vaccine for measles was developed. John Enders and his colleagues strained the measles virus and created a vaccine that was safe for people all over the United States. They saved thousands of lives this way.
In 1970, Raymond Johnson Damadian was an Armenian-American physician, medical practitioner, and inventor of the first MRI scanning machine. He first proposed the MR body scanner in 1969. Damadian was the first to perform a full body scan of a human being in 1977 to diagnose cancer. Damadian invented an apparatus and method to use NMR safely and accurately to scan the human body, a method now well known as magnetic resonance imaging. By 1985, the first robotic surgery was documented. That year saw the first wireless EKG, heart rate monitor, used as a training aid for the Finnish national cross-country ski team. As intensity training became a popular concept in athletic circles in the mid-'80s, the retail sales of wireless personal heart monitors skyrocketed as well. The new millennium saw changes in medicine as well. In 2000, the Da Vinci robotic surgical system won U.S. Food and Drug Administration approval. The system is now used in a wide variety of procedures, including prostate surgeries and coronary artery bypass.
In 2007, scientists have discovered how to use human skin cells to create embryonic stem cells. Scientists have genetically reprogrammed human skin cells to create cells indistinguishable from embryonic stem cells. Now perfected, the new technique would bring stem cell science within easy reach, as they could easily be made in labs of moderate sophistication and without the ethical and legal constraints that now hamper their use by scientists. Jumping to 2014, the FDA approves the first human clinical trials in the United States for a wearable artificial kidney. Designed by the Blood Purification Technologies Incorporated out of Beverly Hills, California, the battery-powered wearable artificial kidney was created by Dr. Victor Gura, an associate clinical professor. His goal was to free end-stage kidney disease patients from being tethered for several hours for 3 days to a week to a dialysis machine. This hope was to improve the quality of life of these patients. In 2015, Harvard geneticist George Church and his colleagues used a gene editing technique known as CRISPR, or CRISPR, to insert mammoth genes for small ears, subcutaneous fat, and the length and color into the DNA of elephant skin cells. The work has not yet been published in a scientific journal and has yet to be reviewed by peers in the field. Many of the medical advancements that were created or discovered earlier are still used today. Hopefully, as time goes on, we can make even bigger and more helpful discoveries and save everyday lives as the field of American medicine continues to grow.